Hello everyone, Arlisha here and welcome to another video. Today we are going to be working on a gouache painting. You will have just seen in my sketchbook over there that I did a couple of thumbnails for this one just to get an idea of the colors I wanted to use. It's so weird looking back at the process for a painting because it takes enough time for me to edit together all of the footage that I kind of forget what the final painting looks like in a way. There's good and bad parts to it in that I get to kind of relive the process of making the painting. So there were so many points when I was watching this footage where I'm like, okay, this has to be almost done, right? But I can look at it and see, oh no, I still have to do this and this and this. And then I look and I'm like, oh, how in the world is there still 45 minutes left of footage that I haven't edited yet? I just have to constantly reassure myself that I'm like, I know I liked how this painting looked by the end, so I just have to trust that we'll get to wherever this thing's going. And I'm really, really grateful for that. And I would highly recommend, even if you don't post videos online, to try recording your entire painting process at least once, because it's so insightful and so helpful for me to look back on the steps that I took and the decisions that I made in a way that, like, that sort of looking back is not something that you can really do without being able to actually look back at the decisions that you made. Your memory will always be a little bit different than actually watching it happen. There were so many times in this painting process where I did something and I was like, I don't really know why I did that. It's just really fun, really insightful, and really helpful to be able to look back on the process. I feel like with gouache in particular, the painting changes so much from the beginning and from those first few layers to when it's actually done. And maybe that's just me. Let me know if you experience anything similar. But because it's opaque, I find that changing my mind or making a kind of spontaneous decision about the colors in a particular area has a way more permanent effect than it does with watercolors, because with watercolors it's all transparent and I'm layering. So I'm thinking about the new color I'm putting on top of an old one, knowing that they're going to work together, instead of when I'm working with gouache, sometimes it's just like, okay, I'm just changing what color this is. And so the painting goes through so many more transformations with this medium. And I think that's really interesting. For me, it makes for a very different watching experience when I'm looking back on the footage, because while you are taking steps and watching the painting get to its final form, it's like more of a winding road. It's not like a straight path where you can see what it's going to look like in the end earlier on. There are some things, I guess, that stay the same, but there's just so much more that changes, I think. Let me know if you've had a similar experience with more opaque mediums in particular. I really wanted to talk to you all about the interesting experiences I've been having when it comes to using different mediums. Like, as someone who's been going through this rotation of trying different things and also just loving a few particular things for so long, I've started to notice the ebb and flow of using different mediums. So I have been using watercolors a lot lately, and I've known that it was just time to focus on watercolors, and I've been learning a lot doing that over the last couple of months, and I think that my watercolor paintings have really improved. My process has improved, my mentality while I'm painting has become more streamlined and more focused, and I knew that if I switched to a different medium during that time, that I would lose momentum. So I stuck with watercolors for a while, and then I just started to get the itch to use gouache again, and I felt that pressure of, okay, I know I'm learning right now, I need to stick with this, that kind of released. And I was able to do this and move into gouache. And it's really interesting because it's not just a back and forth. It's like an upwards back and forth, in that because I was learning more with watercolors, a lot of that knowledge and the understanding and the increased or more developed skills of observation, it all transfers at least partially over to working with different mediums. But it's different because the process is different, so the way that knowledge and information translates to gouache is of course different, and I won't know exactly what that is until I do it. So that's a bit of advice I would give if you're feeling stuck, or if whether it's you don't know what to paint and you're just having like art block, or if you feel like your skills are not really improving, then try switching between like transparent and more opaque mediums if you use watercolors and gouache. I think that they're nice because the materials and that sort of thing is relatively similar for the most part, so it's not a huge transition. But I would highly recommend trying to switch things up if you're feeling stuck, because it can help you to see how the steps that you normally take, like you can see their significance more, because the process either has to change when you're working with a different medium, or you can see it more clearly when you're not just doing the things you normally do. You're going, oh, I was doing this because it's watercolor or because it's gouache, or you can even kind of troubleshoot sometimes where you can see like why something wasn't working. I hope that makes sense, but I find it to be extremely helpful for observing the way that I work, like switching back and forth between these two mediums in particular is something that I hope to just continue to do. Now with gouache, it's usually like I feel like I'm scrambling and it's a chaotic mess until the very end. And then I'm like, oh wait, no, this worked. I did it. Okay, this is fine. No, that happens in varying degrees, and I never feel completely out of control, but I do feel like the quote unquote ugly stage when I'm working with gouache is way longer. And with this piece in particular, there's also the struggle with trying to balance values, where I think that I have a nice range of values in the beginning, and then I go in and I put in a dark value and everything is way too light. I think I build up more gradually with watercolors, so that doesn't happen as drastically for whatever reason. But with gouache, it's almost like heartbreaking, even though I know it's happening and I know it's coming, or I know that I did it, or I know that I usually do it. It happens anyway, and then I'm like, okay, now I'm gonna have to paint over this stuff that I already did to make it darker and make it work. And that feels, a bit weird. I feel like it's a lot more back and forth when I'm working with gouache, and a lot more painting over the same area going, okay, this is the final color, like over and over and over again with gouache. And it's hard to like prepare myself mentally to know that that's going to happen and then just let it go and enjoy it. That being said, I had a lot of fun with this one, and the color thumbnail that I did in the beginning was extremely helpful because I knew certain areas were going to get dark, and I knew I wanted certain colors to be in certain places, so I had a bit of a better idea of the work I was going to have to do, and the steps I was going to have to take, and I was able to see it a bit more clearly. And really, the cycle just continues after this, so I'm going to be going back to watercolor soon, specifically for, I have to do the next round of little originals for my patrons on Patreon. So that's going to be in watercolors this month, and I will be able to take some of the knowledge and the bits of information I've learned about working with gouache into watercolor painting, and the cycle continues on, and I think that's pretty exciting. And even though the gouache process does still feel like, an upwards spiraling of chaos, it is, going up in that I feel like this is the best gouache painting that I've made, I think. I absolutely love the hand in this painting. The hand, I knew from the beginning that I wanted that to be the focal point and the most detailed or developed part of the painting, and I think that I achieved that goal. My least favorite part of this painting, if I had to pick something, would be the hair. I feel like the shapes don't have enough interest to them. Everything's kind of round, and I think that I could have made the hair shapes more interesting. I do like the large variety of values within the hair though, and the fact that there are, varying shapes, I think that works well, and I like it. And it's good to take little bits of that information with me and go, okay, what would I do differently in the future? And I'm sure there will be multiple pieces in the future that are inspired by what I learned from working on this one. A little bit of an example of what I mean by that is the piece that I'm working on now was actually inspired in concept by this painting that I did. This could have been 2017. It was so long ago and I never finished, and it was very, very, very early on in my gouache experience journey, whatever, my time using gouache, and I never finished it because I realized like part of the way through that the anatomy was really broken. But what I loved about this was the saturation and range of values felt so impactful, and it felt very powerful. And of course we have a hand on a face, so they're similar in that way as well. But that sort of strong, bold, kind of messy, modeled impact that the old sketch had was something that I really wanted to capture here. And so I got to, go through that cycle of watercolor, gouache, and lots of other things, and come back to the spirit of that old concept and make it into something new that's better. So I'm sure that I will do that again with this, and there will be lots of future spiritual iterations. Is that a weird way to say that? I'm gonna say it anyway, of what this piece is. Of course, it was so fun to get out the HIMI gouache. It's fun. There's something liberating about having large quantities of paint that are inexpensive. I feel like I can cover things up over and over again and not worry about, I don't know, being wasteful, or like mistakes don't matter as much. And as much as I'm an advocate for using the supplies that you have and trying to overcome the fear of using expensive supplies, I do think that there is a lot of joy to be found in making something, especially something that you really like, with less expensive supplies. That being said, this painting will be for sale on my shop, with some special directions about how to take care of it, because it is made with, less expensive paints. But I still want to provide the opportunity to share it with someone. This painting, I won't be making official prints for it on my shop. I actually painted this painting with the intention of using it for the Patreon mini print for the month of December. So my patrons this month will be receiving this one as a print, and those pledges have already been processed, so it is too late to sign up for this one. But I do fun new prints every month, so if you would like to get a future print, you can sign up over there and do it that way. I would love to hear about your experiences working with different mediums and how you feel that that's beneficial or not beneficial, or if you feel like it fluctuates or changes. Do you feel like you learn from using different things? I would love to hear from you. Do you feel like it's beneficial to use different mediums, or do you find that it's just distracting or overwhelming? I would love to hear from you and to hear what you think. Funnily enough, with this painting, I kept thinking that it was done, and even after I had peeled the tape and taken it off of the block, I just went in and I kept fiddling with it and making changes and making adjustments, and I was trying not to beat myself up for that, because I usually just settle for less than what I know I want. So even if I can take the time to make little changes to a couple of things, that's really only going to benefit me in the long run. So ultimately, I'm glad I did it. as always, a huge thank you to my members on YouTube and my patrons over on Patreon. I'm extremely grateful for all of you, and you're welcome to check out either of those platforms if you would like to support me and this channel further. Thank you all so much for watching and hanging out with me, and I will see you all next week. Bye bye!